Hey everybody, Emily Mayer here, and welcome to Breathe, Hope, Vote, the podcast all about South Carolina politics and legislative happenings in the Palmetto State out of the Arena SC, the only progressive media market for South Carolina media. Tonight with me, I have two individuals that if you have not met yet, you are missing out. I have Evan Lawton and Annika Krovi with me tonight. Evan is the chair of the High School Dems of South Carolina, and Annika is the chair of High School Dems of America, but she is based right out of the Palmetto State with us. So we are thrilled to have them both with us tonight. Evan, Annika, thank you so much for joining us.
So glad to be here.
So excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so right before we hopped on to record, we got news that President Biden was diagnosed with COVID. We, of course, want to wish him well, a speedy recovery. I want to hear from you all what your thoughts are. The conversation has been ongoing about Joe Biden's health. Obviously, hearing that he has COVID is not going to quiet that narrative at all. So just want to hear real quick your thoughts, what the thoughts of those who you work with and engage with in the Gen Z voter area have been saying and talking about in regards to the president and his health.
Evan, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. First, just wanted to thank you for having us on. I'm really excited to have these discussions today, but obviously agreeing with what you said, wishing President Biden well. But I do think that this is going to impact the larger conversation that we have been having for the last few weeks. I think that Gen Z voters largely are dissatisfied with President Biden, and it hurts me to say that because I do think that President Biden has been incredible for our country, and the work that he has put in to move our country in the right direction can't be understated. But I do think that it is important that we do have these conversations, and I don't think that we should be silencing those who do not agree with having those conversations. I think that in a democracy, it's important that we voice our opinions, we voice what we believe about those who lead us. And I think that by continuing to discuss whether or not President Biden is the strongest nominee for the Democrats in 2024 is only a good thing. However, I do think that once this conversation does come to a close, whether or not that ends with President Biden still continuing to be the nominee or someone else, I do think that it is important that we continue to support whoever the nominee is, whether that's President Biden or Vice President Harris. I think that it's important that we do everything that we can to elect whoever the Democratic nominee is in 2024.
Absolutely. Annika, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. First of all, I want to say thank you, Emily, for having us. It's such a pleasure to be able to have a conversation about this with you all. And again, wishing President Biden the absolute best and a quick recovery. I think Evan really hit it on the head in terms of how Gen Z is feeling. I think there has been a lot of apathy, and that's been an ongoing conversation we've been having at the national, state, and local level. And I think recent events have only sort of spurred that even worse. It's almost turned into anger in a lot of Gen Z communities that these are the choices that we have on the ballot. But with that being said, that doesn't change the fact that these are the choices we have on the ballot, right? And it is more important than ever that we are mobilizing young voters to turn out, because if we don't, we truly face a really stark contrast about what our future would look like. It is really a fight for freedom in a lot of ways, which is terrifying, as this is going to be my first time voting, and it feels like there's so much on the line. And yet it's also really, really inspiring because I know that we do have a candidate who we need to support. And in terms of the question on age, I think at the past DNC meeting, Chair Harrison gave a really great point, which is, would you rather have a young Clarence Thomas or an old Thurgood Marshall, right? And of course, it's not that exact situation here, but what matters to me as a voter is the values of the candidate that I'm supporting and the policies they're going to enact. And, former President Trump isn't much younger than President Biden, and the policies he's going to be enacting are going to be far, far worse. So I'm supporting the Biden-Harris team this year because it's critical. It's pretty much the future of, the next 4 years and also probably the following 4 after that. So
you made some really great points, both of you. One, the fact that we knew that both of these men were old, not a secret, right? But two, the fact that it is your first election where you can vote. And I think that's so important. Getting people involved in the process in their first election might not happen when people are 18. It might happen when they're 20 or 30 or 40, or some folks not even until later in life. So the fact that you all at this juncture in your life understand the magnitude of your vote and what is on the line in this election is so important. And I say this constantly, and if I don't say it to the two of you, I'm failing. So please forgive me if I haven't said this to you yet. I wish I knew when I was your age that this was a road that I could go down. I was obviously aware politically. I knew what was going on. I grew up in the greater DC area where the presidential elections and what's happening in DC was always on my radar. But I don't think it was ever a thought to me that I had to do something about it, right? I could get involved. I had power in my voice at that age. How did the two of you get here? How is there a moment that stands out that you were like, I have to do something even though I cannot vote yet? I want to hear this because I think it's so important for folks to realize that it's not just your vote, it's also your voice that matters in this fight. So Annika, let's start with you. How did you get to this point? What made you jump in?
Yeah, of course. I think just like you, I grew up in a household where I was obviously aware of sort of the political climate. But what really stood out to me was when I was sort of just entering high school, I wasn't really sure what I was interested in, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But my grandparents were applying for citizenship. And the reason they had to do that is because of the healthcare situation in our country that made it so inaccessible for them to have affordable healthcare without citizenship, even though that they had been legal permanent residents for so many years. And so seeing them go through that process and then sort of supplementing that with some of the public health research that I had been doing at that time and seeing sort of the impact of things like the child tax credit and policies like that have benefited so many families, I realized that my interest in health, community health, as well as just civic health and social health, all of it was dependent on the policies that were being crafted from the local to the national level. And so that's really when I sort of jumped right in and I joined, school organizations like Youth in Government and Speech and Debate. But once I found the high school Democrats, I sort of found an alleyway for me to voice my opinions without feeling like I had to be limited, especially, in a red state where it feels sometimes terrifying to stand up and say you're a Democrat, especially as a young person. Finding that community of people across the country who felt the same way, who had that same passion, it was life-changing. And that's why I continued to get involved. And now it's a privilege to be chair of the organization and get to see so many other freshmen, sophomores, juniors joining this organization and learning that just because they're not old enough to vote yet doesn't mean that their voice doesn't matter and doesn't mean that they can't make a difference. And it's truly the most inspirational thing.
I love that. Evan, what about you?
No, I totally agree with what Annika said, but I think for me, the first presidential election that I remember was 2016. And obviously that was just crazy in and of itself. I mean, not really compared to what we're facing today, but I do think that, I don't even remember how old I was at that point, but I remember that in seventh grade, I decided that I wanted to be in the Senate page program. I remember I found it, I don't even remember where I found it, somewhere on the internet. I found out about the Senate page program, and that was my goal. It was everything that I did. I knew that that was where I wanted to end up. And so last summer, I was in the Senate page program. I was nominated and I lived in DC for a few weeks. And so that really was the kickstart, I'd say, to me actually being interested in politics. I mean, I'd been interested. I'd watched the news. I'd read the news. Nobody else my age read the news. None of my friends read the news, but that was always just what I did. And so, I'd always found interest in learning about what the people who lead us, who guide us, were doing. And I knew that by being a Senate page, I would have the opportunity to learn about that firsthand. And so being in DC last summer, meeting different students from across the country, that really impacted how I think about different issues and how I feel about my role in moving forward. And so when I came back to South Carolina, that's when I restarted the South Carolina High School Democrats. I had not been involved in the High School Democrats before that, and then I was chair of the state, and that was just, a crazy jump. But this past year, we're close to a dozen chapters in just one school year, and in a red state, I think that is just incredible. It takes a lot for students to stand up and to form that organization within their school, within their community. So I am just so proud of the work that we've done this last year. And I think what's even more impactful is that I'm not even going to be able to vote in this election. I'm still going to be too young. And all of the work that we're doing is for our candidates in this election that I'm not even going to be able to vote for. But I know that in the future, what we do today is truly going to make a difference. And that is what keeps me going, as well as many others within the state.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think we're hearing this crafted narrative that Democrats are stoking this fear about, well, if Trump wins this election, we don't know if we're going to get next election. And like, I truly feel that way. I think like other people are like, oh, that's hyperbolic. You're scaring people. You don't need to go that far. But I truly do feel like that's what's on the line. And I think the political temperature right now is so high. But it's not the Democrats' fault. The Democrats are now just finally calling out all of the things. Like Democrats have run on hope for all of these years, right? It was the pillar of Barack Obama's campaign was this concept of hope. And typically Republicans are the ones who run on fear, but it's more of this made up fear and this fear of others and things that they're not comfortable with. Whereas I think right now we're seeing Democrats finally saying, no, if we're going to get somewhere, we need to start pointing to where the scariness is coming from and the real threats, not the perceived and made up boogeymen that the Republican Party are making up. So what are your thoughts now that the Republican Party is talking all about lowering the temperature and talking about unity despite all of what's going on? I mean, the RNC is literally happening right now. We're waiting for JD Vance to take the stage and give his remarks. They're talking about unity, yet they're also talking about deporting millions of people. I want to hear your thoughts about where the Republican Party is right now and kind of where things seem to be going. Evan?
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point, and something that immediately jumps to mind is just earlier this week when Ron Johnson was giving his speech, and they loaded the wrong speech into the teleprompter, the speech before they decided that they want this convention to be about unity. So he was going off on tangents, and then they were like, oh, wait, wrong speech. I think that just shows where things are today with the current Republican Party, and I make it my goal to never say that I dislike an entire group or an entire organization. I think that only adds to the fuel of people causing hate and vitriol. So I think that it's important that we look at these specific policies that the Republican Party puts forward and then look at who champions those policies and then make decisions about those people and about what they believe. And I think that the Republican convention, I think, has just shown that the Republican Party, while they may call for unity at this point, I think that has not been the case for the last few years. And I think especially starting with former President Trump's entry into Republican politics, I think truly is when it began to get so hateful. I mean, if you go back and look at presidential debates from 20 or 30 years ago, it's just two people having a conversation. It was never, attacking people for the way that they look or for their family members. It was attacking policy choices, which I think is completely okay. But I do think that the current climate in our political system has become dangerous. And I think that moving forward, we need to make an effort to move away from that hatred.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely couldn't have said it better myself. I think Evan and I both have grown up in a hyper polarized world. And so it's sometimes hard to even imagine what it would be like to have civil discourse in a lot of political settings. I do think, the Republican Party is a mess right now. I think that they're moving further and further towards extremism in a lot of cases and a tolerance for a sort of hate that is like deeply un-American. And Evan's right that it's individuals in that party that are championing it and sort of polluting what could be a party that is a little bit more respectful. But I have friends who are Republican. I have conversations with them often about these policy choices, and we disagree on a lot of fundamental things. But at the end of the day, we walk away from those conversations feeling like we had a chance to voice our opinions and sort of explain our worldview. I hope that with this next generation, maybe we can try to restore that same perspective into our policymaking and our legislative bodies. But, looking at the way that it's going right now, it's unfortunate that there's so much hypocritical statements coming out of the RNC right now about, unity when their entire platform is based on division.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that stands out, great example is Nikki Haley and how she ran her entire presidential campaign on being the true conservative choice, but that Donald Trump was basically an anti-conservative, right? And that, if people start choosing her, they're standing up against Trumpism and the extremism that's coming from folks he surrounds himself with. And then you turn around and here she is at the RNC, right? And originally she wasn't going to be there. They had not invited her because they had openly said, if you're a Nikki Haley supporter, we don't want you. But yet then they wanted to bring this message of unity after the assassination attempt and trying to bring that temperature down, allegedly. And so they extended her an invitation. And then she gets on stage and basically says, yeah, this is my guy. It's hard for me to believe that young voters buy that, see that as legitimate, that you can stand up for months and months and months on end and say, this is not who we are. And if you want to find a different home, you can find it with me. And then the moment that she has the opportunity to maybe further herself in the next Trump administration or beyond, she takes that opportunity for herself and kind of throws those values by the wayside. So when we think about where things are going with the leadership of the next potential Trump administration, JD Vance was just tapped to be the VP pick. Tell me what your thoughts are, what you were thinking when you first heard that, kind of as you've sat with it for a couple of days now, where maybe your thoughts have gone to. I know I certainly have some, but is Vance, he's a younger guy. Is he going to appeal to younger voters? Like what's going on
God,
here?
I hope not. I truly hope not, because if so, they're not paying attention. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it is, again, just hypocritical statements on hypocritical statements. You look back at all of the statements he's made on Trump in the past, about, how he thinks Trump is an awful leader, dictator-like, all of these crazy statements that, you would never expect to come out of your vice presidential candidate. And then you turn around and as soon as he's announced, he's, again, just the biggest Trump fan. And so I think it really serves to prove the point that, like, the Republican Party right now is not aligned, it's not unified, and it's not promoting a central vision, because every single person in that party, at one point has said something and gone back and flipped on it, especially in regards to Trump. And so it's frightening that JD Vance is the pick, because I think he just adds to the extremism that is on the ticket. But I hope young voters sort of see that just because this is a young person doesn't mean that they represent the young voter base, and it certainly doesn't mean that they should be supported by us.
Absolutely. I totally agree with what you said. And I think when I think about JD Vance, and him being picked as former President Trump's vice presidential pick, I think that he picked him because he knew that he would be a yes man, and that anything that Trump wanted to do, JD Vance would go out there and support it wholeheartedly, which that is what Trump looks for. That's the kind of person that he is. That's the kind of personality that he has. He looks for somebody who will say, yep, I will absolutely do that, and not think about how it will affect other people. I think looking at JD Vance's calls for national abortion bans, I mean, according to Trump's new position on abortion, which is leaving it to the states, I think that totally contradicts what former President Trump has said. But I think that JD Vance would be happy to change that policy position simply because he knew that it would benefit himself and that it would put him in a position of power that he would better be able to leverage in the future. And I think, again, bringing up the Nikki Haley story, I think that is incredibly telling about what kind of a leader she is, and that she would completely flip-flop on her entire campaign, which was running against former President Trump in the Republican primary. And I think that if she had, stayed back and not endorsed Trump and just left him, to continue on as the nominee, I think that she might have had a future in the Republican Party were Trump to lose in the 2024 election. I think that, would people be done with former President Trump? Would they think that he is no longer the strongest nominee for our party? But I think that she realized what she could get out of it by endorsing former President Trump and how that would benefit her in the coming administration. And I think that in the end, some of these people are looking at this strictly for what a position can do for themselves rather than for the people that they are serving.
100% agree. And I know we also had a U.S. senator from our state who maybe thought that because he bowed out early enough and kissed the ring early enough, he might be in the running for that vice presidential pick. Was there any thought in your mind that maybe it was going to be Tim Scott that got the nod? Or were you like, there's no way? I think he might have thought that he was going to get it, but I don't know how based in reality that is. What were your thoughts about Tim Scott as a potential VP pick, Evan?
I think that former President Trump likes to keep people guessing. And I think that he likes to, make people think that they might be closer than they think they are. I think that by bringing Senator Scott and other politicians from across the country to his rallies, having them speak to his supporters, I think he was putting in their mind the idea that they might be picked as the vice presidential nominee. But no, I did not think that he had a chance.
He was dangling that carrot. He was trying to see all that he can get. Annika, do you agree?
Yeah, completely. I'm just gonna agree with the Senate page here, who's probably spent more time with the senators than the rest of us. And yeah, I think, Tim Scott probably never stood a chance.
And so, it's interesting because since JD Vance has gotten the pick, there's been a lot unearthed about not only things that he said, but about his family history, right? And the book that he wrote about getting out of Appalachia, about his wife and his family, right? They are a mixed race family. And in the Republican Party, the way that things are going in the Republican Party, I should say, that may have been a shock or unknown to some of the delegates that were in the room at convention. I know I saw on social media, some of the terrible folks that are in those far corners of Elon Musk's Twitter world really had a lot to say, very unkind things about JD Vance because of the way that his family looks. And I just wonder, I feel as if Gen Z is probably some of the most open-minded, accepting people in my lifetime generation experience, right? My parents are from the boomer generation. I'm a millennial. I kind of have like a well-rounded view on the generations that we got right now. So in my viewpoint, I feel as if Gen Z is probably the most accepting group of folks that I've ever met. So when even if there are Gen Z voters who align themselves with the Republican Party, do narratives like that help, hurt? Like what? I don't even know what my question is here, but I just can't let that point go that this man chose to love who he loved and got the nod to be VP pick, and people within his own base of his party are not okay with that, and that just is kind of unfathomable to me that that's where we are in 2024. Have you do you have thoughts on that? I just needed a moment to let that out.
No, I appreciate you for sharing that and completely agree. I think, first of all, from a political standpoint, when you close yourself off to a demographic of people, right? Like when you say that these are others and we and they are other, you're automatically, closing yourself off to an entire base of voters and constituents and people that you're supposed to be representing. But, that's purely political. As like an Indian American woman, as a second generation immigrant, to see the comments that are being made about another Indian American woman who is an American person who deserves that same level of respect that we all do, it's abhorrent, it's frustrating, and it really proves to me the fact that the Republican Party is running on a hatred in a lot of cases. It's terrifying. It's terrifying to see my peers regurgitating some of these messages, and to see people that I thought that I could look up to or trust sort of absorb that information as if it is true, as if there is some reason why an Indian American woman could not be the second lady, or even the vice president in this case. So I think when you see those messages, it just really stands out to me and proves to me that, of course, it is not the entire Republican Party, but there are a lot of actors in that party, in that base, that are not welcoming, that are not open to the idea of inclusive democracy, and that is scary in the 21st century.
Yeah, and we should add the fact that she's a highly educated, highly successful woman, right? She has clerked for 2 Supreme Court justices. Like, it's not just that she's JD Vance's wife, right? Like, she stands on her own as an individual. So great point there. Evan, thoughts?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, and I think again this reinforces the message that the Democratic Party is the party of the people. It is the party of inclusivity, and I think that had JD Vance been a Democrat and had been picked as vice president, I don't think that there would have been any conversation about this. I think that this would have been just somebody who was picked for vice president, and I think that it's incredibly sad that we have to have this conversation because that's not the way that anybody should be talked about, or things should be shared about in this manner. I think that, while I may not agree with a lot of what JD Vance believes, I do think that he or his wife should face any of these sort of discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know Vice President Harris has faced that every single day of her life. So not lost on us, not unfamiliar to us. Absolutely. Um, where were you on Saturday when news broke about the shooting at the Trump rally? What were your initial thoughts? What are your thoughts now that we've had some time to sit and process it and have gotten more question mark, and I'm going to put that question mark there strongly, information about what has happened? I know there are some internet conspiracies out there for sure. I am not one of those, but I know that they exist. Where were you, Evan? What were your first thoughts, and what are your thoughts a few days later?
I will first say in a very large question mark as to what really happened. I mean, how do you let someone with a weapon onto a building near former President Trump? That is just the first thing. I mean, it is just crazy. So I got a notification on my phone from the Young Democrats of South Carolina chat. Somebody said that former President Trump had been shot, and I was like, oh, okay. I haven't gotten anything from CNN, NBC, none of that. And I was actually just getting home when that happened, and I walked in. My parents were watching the news. There was nothing on the news. I was like, okay, maybe somebody heard something wrong, whatever. My friends came pick me up. I left. The second I walked out the door, my mom called me and said, you were right. They just broke it on the news that he had been shot. And I was like, how did I know this 4 minutes before WIFF News knew this? It was just, Lord. And I mean, the first thought that anybody should have when that happens is, like, we are praying for you. We are wishing you the quickest recovery. I mean, obviously, no matter who the person is, you can't hope, you can't wish for something like that to happen. And I think that, especially in this case, it's important that we come together, not just as a party, but as a country, in making sure that we support former President Trump and his recovery. But I do think that this is going to have an impact on the election. I think that this, while it might not sway voters' minds to vote for former President Trump, I do think that it is going to bring out more Trump supporters who might not have been likely to vote in the first place. I think that, historically, the Democratic Party does have better turnout, and that is what has helped them win elections in the past. And so I do worry about what this will mean for turnout within the Republican Party. I do think that this could bring out more people to the polls, and it's going to be interesting to see how that will affect the election.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Annika?
Yeah. Well, I guess to answer the first question, on Saturday, I had just gotten home as well I was volunteering at a community health sort of event.
Of course
And
you were.
I got a call from Phil Ford, who's our colleague, and he was like, turn on the news. And I was like, what happened? He was like, turn on the news. And I was like, okay. And I rush over to my phone. I turn on the news on the TV. I see that former President Trump has been shot. And I'm just like, what now? Like, truly, I was like, I think 2024 is throwing every possible curveball at us, and I can't imagine. Of course, I was, terrified, because that's an incredibly scary situation for any, political rally, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. For there to have been a shooting at a political rally, speaks volumes to the state of polarization that we're in. And also, it's also scary that, it reached Trump, right? Like, that it wasn't stopped beforehand. I mean, I think sort of in the moments after, I was just processing, reaching out to people, figuring out like sort of what the words to say are when you have such a shocking event happen. And of course, agree with Evan that that's the time for the country to come together, unify, and, I think President Biden's call to cool down the temperature in terms of rhetoric and polarization definitely was needed and appreciated. But I also think it's a reminder that political violence is becoming increasingly normalized, and we have to find a way to stop it. There's no way we can have a functioning democracy if this is our normal. And I think a part of that obviously involves sort of better, firearm regulations and preventions to ensure that they don't end up in the wrong hands in the first place. But also it involves everyday conversations and everyday actions by Americans to ensure that the dialogues that we're having don't turn vitriolic and violent. And I think that's an expectation we have to put on ourselves and each other in our normal conversations, not just on our politicians.
Yeah, agree 100%. And I just want to say I'm the one who notified Phil. So by osmosis, that means you got notified because of me. But no, when the text first came into me, it just said like Trump is shot, right? And so like automatically your first thought is like, is where on his, like, not where was he physically, where did it hit him? Is he alive? Is like, and then when you found out it was his ear, you're like, okay, I could take a little bit of a deep breath for a moment, but then you start to think about what all of it means. And it's just, our generations have only learned about this sort of political violence in history books, right? JFK, Malcolm X, MLK, Bobby Kennedy, Kent State, right? There's a history of a period of time in our nation where that was happening. And you can't help but feel like, oh, well, that was history. That's not going to happen now. And then it does. And then in a matter of days, things are seemingly back to normal. The RNC is having their convention, like nothing happened. I mean, it's just like very jarring to realize that like life just kind of continued on and we're just expected to kind of go with the flow and take that for what it is. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'll be curious
And
to see as the rest of this unfolds how that plays into it, Annika.
yeah, and I just also wanted to add, it's as someone who goes to a lot of political events, to hear about the father who, lost his life protecting his family at an event like that is just incredibly terrifying. My heart goes out to his family and to his loved ones, but to know that just by expressing your freedoms and your political beliefs that you have a risk of losing your life is terrifying. And I think that's something that we all sort of need to come to terms with and figure out how to move forward from.
Could not agree more. Okay. RNC is this week. We got about a month until the DNC in Chicago. Who's going? Who's going? Both of you? One of you? Who's going? Evan's
I'll
not going. Annika's going.
I'll
I'm
be there.
going. Annika, do you have any idea what to expect? I have no idea.
I'm trying my best to get an idea, but everyone who I ask is like, "You'll figure it out when you get there." So
What does that mean? That sounds like chaos. I don't like to function that way.
yeah, well, I hope it'll be the best convention we've ever had in Chicago. Not very not a very difficult bar, but I'm looking forward to hearing about the plans. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of exciting speakers. I think obviously recent political events have sort of put a lot of question marks in the air about what will be happening, and hopefully that'll sort of be resolved soon. But I think anytime I get to go to an event like this, it's always an honor and a privilege. There's so many awesome folks you get to meet, make contact with, not just, political mentors, but also just people our age. I'm super excited that we're going to have a pretty strong group of high school Dems coming with us who have been elected delegate in their various states, and then even more college and young Dems. And so it's always nice to be in community with those folks from across the country.
Yeah, so who haven't you gotten to meet yet that you're hoping to meet at the DNC?
If you want my honest answer, we're gonna be in Chicago, and it sounds like maybe there's a potential for President 44 to show up. I would love to be able to just hear a speech live from President Obama, not even meet him, just hear his words. Uh,
You just triggered a memory for me when I was 12, which was in 2005. I'm just going to put that out there. We'll put our age disparity out for the world to see. In 2005, when I was 12, there was a rally in DC for Darfur when the issues surrounding Darfur were really top of mind, and he was one of the speakers. And at the time, 2005, nobody really knew who Barack Obama was. And I was sitting on the grass. I don't love crowds, kind of really freaks me out. So everyone's standing around me, and I was the 12-year-old sitting on the ground. And he starts speaking, and I look up to my dad, and I'm like, who's speaking right now? Whose voice is that? And he says, Senator Barack Obama from Chicago. And I was like, he has a really good speaking voice. I think he's going to be president one day. So my dad and
so
I
basically,
we come
Emily
back
Mayer
to that.
called it.
Yeah, we come back to that often. He's like, remember when you said that? So yeah, if you get the chance to, I mean, just we've seen what's played out since 2005. We all know he's a fantastic speaker, but there's just something about hearing it in person that is so powerful that even 12-year-old Emily knew at the time that there was something powerful about that man's voice. If I ever met him, I genuinely don't know what I would do. I don't know if I would like actually be functioning as a human being. So
I think I
I'm
would
glad to hear
freak
you
out.
say that.
I try so hard not to, idolize political figures in that way. But there's just a few folks who just you look up to so much that it's just like your brain short circuits if you would ever have the chance to meet them, and I think he would be one for sure.
Absolutely. Who are some of the people or some of the places you've gotten to go along this road, Evan, that have really just been like, I can't believe that I'm a high school student, but that I get to experience this world?
Obviously, the biggest one is going to be is the Senate page. I mean, we had unrestricted access to the floor to the senators. I mean,
So cool.
that in itself, yeah, that was crazy. But I'd say more recently, definitely Senator Booker has been just so awesome. I mean, the fact that he's come to South Carolina so many times when he didn't have to, out of his own goodwill. And when he came to Spartanburg, he brought me up on stage and filmed a video for the South Carolina high school Dems, which that was just, I mean, he didn't have to do that. He did that because he wanted to. And then again, it was, I don't even remember what the event was, but it was in Columbia, and it was Senator Booker and Senator Warnock. And I
Oh
got to
yeah,
meet
for
him
the
again.
state convention. Yep.
Yes, yep, I got to meet him again. He filmed another video for us. I mean, he has just been, who am I meeting Senator Booker? I mean, I never imagined that something like that was going to happen, just over a year ago. And so I think that is the biggest one that has stuck with me throughout this journey.
Well, Evan says, "Who am I?" I just want to chime in here really quick because I have not had the opportunity yet to brag on how privileged I am to know Evan and to have him as a friend here in this space. Like, he truly deserves all of it. I can't wait to see what you're going to do with South Carolina high school Dems next year when I'm a has-been and in college. But he's so articulate. He's so thoughtful. He's done such an incredible job of reviving an organization that was literally dead before he inherited it, and he's pulled so many other folks along for the journey as well. It's so clear that he's in this for the purpose and not for personal gain. And you see that reflected every time you meet him. I met him for the first time at a Greenville County Dems event and just talked to him for 5 minutes, and I was like, whoa, this kid's awesome. And it's just been awesome to get to see you for the past year continue to do amazing things. So that's my little brag. I had to get it in before this podcast was over.
You're too kind, Annika. I mean, I can say all the same things and more for you. I mean, I don't want to turn this into who can give the best compliments, but I mean, the fact that you're able to lead the high school Democrats of America, I can't even. I envy you and all that you do. So I wanted to add that as well.
The moment that I found out that the chair of the High School Dems of America was a South Carolinian, I was like, am I hearing this correctly? Is that the truth? So it has been a privilege to work alongside of you, Annika, and I'm excited to spend the next year working alongside Evan in even a more bigger capacity. But so if folks want to know about high school Dems, Evan, if they are in high school themselves and they don't know if they have a chapter or they don't know if they're allowed to start a chapter at their school, what do they need to do? How can you be supportive of them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So, this past year, a lot of our work has been on rebuilding our chapters and expanding. And this year, we're eyeing about 20 schools that we're hoping to expand into. And I think the biggest thing is just reaching out. That is the first step. There is no harm in reaching out to me, reaching out to anyone else on our state board. Just by reaching out, we can help do a lot of the work for you. I mean, we have created local chapter guides, we've created programming guides, we have, step-by-step instructions on how you can start a chapter at your high school. And that really is how the organization functions. I mean, for our state level and for the national level, I mean, our local chapters are truly what keeps this organization going. And I think that by students taking that initiative to form a chapter in their school or even in their community, if they don't feel comfortable forming one in their school, I think that it really can help create a space for those who might not have the opportunity to discuss their political beliefs at home, or with their friends. And so I think that it's really important that we continue to push this message that it's not scary to go out there within our state and, speak your truth and your opinions. And so, if anybody is listening that's interested in starting a chapter within South Carolina, I'd be more than happy to hear from you. You can reach out to me or our statewide Instagram account anytime, and we'll be happy to help you out.
I love it. I love it. And Annika, as you sail off into the sunset onto college, Harvard, what parting words of wisdom for the next generation of high school Dems leaders do you want to share?
Well, hopefully it's not a sunset. Hopefully we're still in the sunrise portion.
Yeah, if your sunset is when you're 18 years old, we got a big problem. There are big things ahead for you, 100%.
But thank you. I mean, parting words, I'm still sort of coming to terms with the fact that this term is ending. It's been such a whirlwind of excitement and new ideas and meeting incredible people in high school as well as, older. But I think a couple of the key lessons that I've learned that I hope the rest of the high school Dems community also has a chance to learn through their time in the organization is, first of all, to just ask. I've learned so much just by pushing a door open, even if I thought it was closed to me. There are folks that I've had the opportunity to meet just because I hung around for 5 extra seconds and asked if they had a moment to speak. And I think that as high schoolers, we're often told that there are only certain paths we can go down, or there's certain doors that we have to just wait and wait and wait until it's our time. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned this year is that there's no need to wait. Like I said earlier, just because you can't vote yet doesn't mean you don't have a voice. And you always have a capability to make a difference in your community, no matter how young you are. And so if you're passionate about an issue, even if someone's telling you to wait, just know that your time is whenever you choose to start. And there's so many people along the way that are willing to help you out.
Could not have said it better myself. And I just want both of you to know that I have been in spaces where folks have seen either one of you or both of you, and a lot of the sentiment is just pure awe that you all already have such a good head on your shoulders. You know what you believe in. You're not afraid to speak it out to the world. A lot of folks in the party lament about the average age of our participation, and the two of you are such a bright spot. Make people feel as if there is a light at the end of the tunnel for all the work that they have done, to hopefully pave the way for more folks like you to get involved. So I just want to make sure that you have heard that, because I have heard it and I know it to be true. And having seen both of you work, I know there's a long path of great things ahead of both of you. And so for you to take some time out of a Wednesday evening and sit with me and let folks know about all the great stuff that's being done by your organization, I greatly appreciate it. That was Evan and Annika. I am Emily Mayer. This was Breathe Hope Vote. Y'all have a great week and subscribe to The Arena.